In Mississippi, Jenny Beth Martin and the Tea Party Patriots try to prove their worth. I don't know why I'm using that accent.
What other accent are you going to use?
Exactly.
I mean, let's be real here.
She is on track to make $450,000 as head of the Tea Party Patriots. It's written into her contract that she can ride first class anywhere in the country, but according to her lawyer, she doesn't use that perk.
It's more of an option thing. It's just a respect. It's a sign.
Yes. The interesting thing about Jenny Martin's story is that before she was head of the Tea Party Patriots, she was a software manager who quit her job to get fertility treatments and give birth to twins. The temp agency of her husband, Lee Martin, which I guess he ran, went belly up. They had a debt of more than $500,000, so they filed bankruptcy. They allowed for government intervention to stand in the way of them and their creditors. Now, of course, I'm sure when they don't like all these rules and regulations that are hurting our economy and keeping us from living in a true free market, they don't mean bankruptcy, corporate bankruptcy. A corporation, an entity that is licensed and chartered by the government, that allows them arm's length distance from liability, not the least of which protection from their own personal assets from the creditors who are owed money by his company. She is, according to this piece, has had to publicly contend the fact that she and her husband filed for bankruptcy. But less well known is the fact that her husband accepted unemployment for a time. I never said there should be no safety net, she says. That decision was more difficult for him than the decision not to stay in our house. We were scraping by. In other words, you see, he is different.
It should be a safety net, not a hammock, unless it's funding the hammock that my husband's laying in while he's not working.
You understand that unemployment benefits are for the regulars, not the irregularities who voted
traditionally
in this Mississippi race. It is for me, but not for thee, as it were. We were scraping by. Not like those other irregular types. And you've all read the stories. You know we have problems. Who have been collecting unemployment insurance. That's different because it's us. And now, of course, I'm making $450,000 a year fueling an organization that would do away with unemployment insurance for the irregulars. I mean, this is the perfect example, right? I mean, honestly, these people are a joke. The joke may be on us because they still continue to dominate, at the very least, congressional elections in enough parts of the country so that they can do things like make it impossible for things like long-term unemployment insurance to be extended. But this is the reality of the Tea Party and Chris McDaniel.
Sam, you are quite right to note the fraud that is rampant across the Tea Party movement, which is why today I am launching, along with several other leading conservatives, Tea Party Patriots, USA Patriots Together Act Now to Save America and the Family. Thank you for that addition. That's very important, Matt.
What is the acronym for that?
I don't think you remember.
FAMSA. We'll just call it that. Anyways, in a time of rampant communism, threats to the fundamental American way of life, irregular voting patterns, mass migration, and the undoing of the American currency as we sink further and further into debt into the Chinese and terrorists move across the Middle East. We must have true, authentic American patriots acting to save America together today. Stand now, we stand together for America. Honestly, Sam, I get a headache, actually, trying to keep up with all of the notes that we must hit. But the point is I was never on unemployment insurance. I never complained about my job in a rock quarry in Robben Island, like that communist socialist you had on yesterday.
To be fair, who was paying for your room and board at that time?
The reason that I was struggling against the apartheid regime is so they would be so liberal as to pay for room and board of our prisoners. Okay. My initial objection to the regime was, as I told you, the small allocation of health care and the Bantustans. This is why we created the African National Congress. And this is why we struggle today against Obamacare and the ravages of Kenyan socialism that he is laying on the country. Believe me, I have seen Kenyan socialism firsthand, Sam.
I don't doubt
that place is a hellhole.
All right. Well,
so go to Tea Party Patriot Act USA for families today. Sign up for our newsletter. Also, if you sign up today, there is a special offer for investments on a gold band powder that will give you life extension, insure your IRA account, and protect your family in the face of inevitable social collapse. Also, Alex Jones secretly works for the communist cabal. I'm very sorry to hear this. And I guess my point is we were going to have a joint venture before, but he screwed me over by working with Dr. Group. And we have our own iodine powder. We have our own Tea Party group. No unemployment benefits. We will save America together. And we do not have to slide into the recessive theta male Social Security fueled debt collapse that Sam Cedar and others of his ilk advocate for. Thank you very much.
Scott Walker was the subject of documents that were released last week by a court. These were prosecutor filings saying that Scott Walker was at the center of a, quote, criminal scheme to oversee the coordination of money between outside groups and his campaign and other campaigns in the recall elections in Wisconsin. And the Journal Sentinel has reported that a 50-year-old man named Robert Monroe was caught and charged with voting illegally more than a dozen times in 4 different elections, including the recall elections. And apparently the way they caught this guy was because his son denied requesting an absentee ballot from his father's address in Shorewood. They must have seen some discrepancy there. Shorewood, I guess, is a place in Wisconsin. And then they started suspecting his dad. A complaint claimed that Monroe voted 5 times in Governor Scott Walker's recall election. He was also accused of voting illegally in a 2011 Wisconsin Supreme Court election. Remember, that Supreme Court election was for a judge who was necessary to maintain the validity of Scott Walker's law that busted up unions in Wisconsin. He was also charged with voting in a multiple times in a 2012 primary and the 2012 presidential election. It has been determined that he has donated at least to 1 Republican state senator. They used Monroe's cell phone records to prove that he traveled all the way to Indiana to vote a second time in the 2012 presidential election. And so what prosecutors did is they tested some of these absentee ballots for genetic material and found only DNA belonging to Monroe. That seems to be going really. They really put in 100% in that. In May of 2012, prosecutors said that Monroe begged his sons and his brother to register to vote. And not just his sons and his brother, but his ex-wife. It was like, sweetheart, I know that we had some problems, but please.
Darlene, I am sorry for continually sexually harassing my secretary in front of you. And I'm sorry for in court filing saying you were a terrible mother and trying to give you absolutely no money. I think we need to put this all aside and commit multiple voter frauds for Scott Walker. And remember, if you feel an ethical concern about this, we are not irregulars. So a different set of laws applies.
You must go to City Hall and register to vote, the message said. Every vote will be needed. Please. And Monroe insists that he has no recollection of voting in the elections because he takes drugs for attention deficit and obsessive compulsive disorders. Now, let me say this.
I'm obsessed with those little Hispanic kids not getting my money, and I could barely even focus, so I drove all the way to Illinois to vote again because I hate them so much, but I didn't know what I was doing because I can't focus on...
I had no idea what I was doing.
There's so many targets moving, see?
Look, what this proves is, the folly of voter fraud. This could very well be one of the few recorded cases of voter fraud, actual voter fraud, in the entire country. But it shows the absolute folly that literally you need to have a psychological disorder. If you think by perpetrating voter fraud, you're going to achieve anything. It also shows how hard it is to get away with it. Because there's simply no way to do this in any scale that could impact an election. Maybe, I suppose, short of an election if you are in a town of like 50 people, but theoretically then it would be that much harder for you to do it in the first place. So this proves how ridiculous the idea of voter fraud is. And it leads credence to what we obviously know, that attempts to stop voter fraud are really attempts to stop certain segments of our population from voting. Poor people, elderly people, African Americans, Latinos. That's what it's all about. Now, Monroe faces 13 felony election fraud charges, including voting more than once, voting as a disqualified person, registering in more than one place, providing false information to election officials. You could spend 18 months in prison and pay a $10,000 fine for each. Math, back of the envelope, that's a potential for $130,000. I am not a PhD in mathematics.
I am aware of the irony that I am the one engaging in voter fraud.
There you go.
I will acknowledge that. You also need a significant disposable income to commit voter fraud. And
I gotta get some type of P.O. box or another house in Indiana, I guess.
And also just time to drive around.
That's right. Fortunately for me, I have the ability and the economic wherewithal so that I can take time off of work, head down to Indiana if necessary, and perhaps I could have actually traveled to multiple other states, but because of my attention deficit disorder, could not keep it straight in which states I was actually falsely registered in.
As I was logging my miles in, I warmed my heart with images of old black ladies struggling onto buses in attempts to get photo IDs so they could just barely make it in time to vote, and in the end missing their polling station as they closed down.
Of course, the total irony is that we have all sorts of regulations to fight voter fraud in both states. And as an elderly white guy, I was still able to perpetrate this.
I'm actually an expert in these laws, again, ironically, as both an enforcer of really racist and intrusive ones and a breaker of them myself. Best story ever.
Please refrain from the accents. It alienates people. You're not Mel Brooks. Really? Come on.
It's the first we've heard of that.
Which accents?
Kenny Pick. More alienating accents, please. Zarro. And Michael Brooks' voice talents are amazing, by the way. Just out of my balls. More accents, please. Shank Steele. Love the accents. Love the Midwest accent. Michael did. Nailed it. Right Wing Mandela needs a Facebook page used as a feeder of the shows. And F you, Michael. I'm from the Midwest and I'm offended. Lenny, hey, Sam, we love the accents. Do the whole show that way. Michael's moose was hilarious. Folks.
I guess that means the Wisconsin thing.
Oh, yes.
That's it.
Okay. That was the alienating voice we did. The
Well,
Wisconsin
screw
one, I
you.
bet. How dare we?
All right. Well,
I will vote multiple times that I continue to do
hey,
that voice.
hey, oh.
Here we go.
Time to lose from Massachusetts.
Sorry,
Oh,
never
excuse
left
us.
Queens.
Yeah.
I apologize. Sorry, can't take a
Pardon-
4-hour bus ride up to Mass.
Pardon me, fancy pants. All right.
Go suck on your Monster Energy and tune out of this for a little while.
This is very distressing. I don't know what to touch here first.